Mayari's purifiers are a graceful company of lumineth elves who glow with the power of Haish, the realm of light. Steeped in arcane learning and skill, they have entered the dire chasm to calm its wrath. In this video, we're going to show how to paint Mayari Lightcaller himself. However, by following this guide, you can easily paint the other members of his warband. So when you're ready, grab those brushes, shake those paints, and let's get started. Before we begin painting, the first thing we need to do is undercoat the model. And as you can see, I've undercoated Mayari Lightcaller with Corax White, which is perfect for all the light tones I'm going to be using in this paint guide. Now I'm going to start by picking out any silver details, so the armour trim and the little ringlets on his staff with Einhand steel. So I'm just going to grab a small layer brush for this because I can get a nice point to it. Just add a couple of dollops of Einhand steel, a little bit of water, and then just get a nice point to the brush. Again, just doing a couple of little spins in your fingers like so. And then we're ready to start picking out that trim. So all I've got is like a few bits here, top of the chest breastplate, and then just a little bit on the shoulder pad there. There we are, that's silver trim now done. We're going to move on to the next stage, which is to apply the rest of the colours to the armour and the robes. So I'm going to start first by using Skeleton Horde to thin down my contrast medium. I'm going to thin it down probably 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Skeleton Horde. This is going to go over that silver trim just to give it a nice brass effect. We're going to do it over the robes as well as the owl. After that, once it's dry, we'll use Corax White to just layer up some of the feathers on the owl and tidy up any armour. Then we'll be using Wraithbone to highlight the robes, followed with Pallid Witch Flesh to do a final highlight on the robes. And then we'll use a little bit of white scar here and there on the owl and the armour to do some tidy up and highlighting. But first of all, let's start with that mix of contrast medium and Skeleton Horde. So I'm going to get a couple of dollops of contrast medium, a little bit more because that first didn't have much on it at all. And then 1 paintbrush of Skeleton Horde mixed together. It's a bit lighter. And then again, always important, get a nice point to your brush. And then we're going to start the robes first of all and work our way along. So we've got the robes just here to do. Also that trim. There we are, that contrast mix now dry. What we're going to do now is use Corax White for doing any tidying up, such as like around the areas on his collar, picking out this little banding he's got going around on some of the bits of his clothing, especially the robes, and also highlighting some of the feathers on that owl too. There we are, with any white details now tidied up, the trim on the robe's done and the feathers on the owl done, we're going to move on to using Wraithbone. Now in some places, you probably want to layer it, especially on like some of the areas of the robes here, but in other places you just want to do a fine highlight, like around on the owl and some bits of the robes at the back. So just take your time, work your way around. There we are, with the Wraithbone now laid up and highlighted. What we're going to do now is use Pallid Witch Flesh for some finer highlights. I'm just going to do this on the back, so I'm just going to start picking out some of those folds. Just take your time. Work your way around. There we are, with the Pallid Witch Flesh now done. What we're going to do now is use white scar just to pick out some of the feathers on the owl and tidy up any raised areas on any of the white details, so mainly the trim around his robes. I'm just going to start doing some little bits on the owl's face. There we are, with that white scar highlight now done. What we're going to do now is move on to painting the light cloth. Now we're going to start by using Lothian Blue. We're going to thin this down with some Lamy Medium because we're going to treat it more as a wash, but it just gives us the right tone to match the cloth that you see on the model on the box art. After that, we're just going to do some highlights of Corax White, and in some of the deeper recesses, we'll then reapply some Lothian Blue after that. But first of all, let's make this mix. So I'm going to get a couple of paintbrushes of Lamy Medium to apply that to my palette, and I'll probably do about 3. There we are. I'll give the brush a quick wash. And then I'm just going to get a little bit of Lothian Blue, not too much, just a tip. I'm just going to mix that together like so. It's nice and watery enough. So what I'm going to do is load my brush up, and then I'm going to start painting his trousers in that. You've also got the collar around the top to do as well. I'm just going to apply this like so. It gives us a nice vibrant blue, but also just bringing away from the edges, showing some of that Corax White. There we are, with that Lothian Blue mix now applied. What we're going to do now is do some layering and also highlighting on the folds of this cloth here. So I'm just going to pick out some of these edges just here with a little bit of Corax White like so. Then when we get to the top of these trousers, I'm just going to actually start layering that. You can always thin it down a little bit more if you want a bit more translucency. There we are, with those areas now layered and highlighted. We're just going to finish off by dropping some more Lothian Blue into some of those recesses where we might have got some white. So just add a bit more depth, strength to it. It's going to be more prevalent just on the top here. We've obviously got all this nice swirly whirly design. There we are with that light blue now done. We're going to move on to painting the dark blue sash and tassels on the model. We're going to start by using Night Lord blue as a base coat. After that, we're going to layer back up using a little bit of Cantor blue, then start highlighting with a Laytop blue, and finish off with a final highlight here and there of Lothern blue. But first of all, let's start with that Night Lord's blue. So I'm just going to get a little bit on the palette, bit of water as well. And it's always important getting a nice point to your brush. And we're ready to start picking out those tassels and sash. So I'm just going to start doing the tassels first. I'm just going to spin around here so you can see me picking those out. So again, just take your time. You might want to do a couple of coats of this. There we are with that Night Lord's blue now applied. What we're going to do now is just layer up the sash using Cantor blue. So you're just looking to pick out those raised areas. There we are. What we're going to do now is highlight the sash and tassels using a Laytop blue. So again, just going to start picking out those raised areas first, just using the edge of my brush like so. If you make any mistakes, just tidy back up with those previous base paints. There we are with that highlight of a Laytop blue now done. What we're going to do now is use Lothern blue just for a final highlight here and there. So you're looking for just like sharp edges, like some of the real crisp folds you see on the sash. If you do make them quite large like that, you can always tidy back up with some Laytop blue to make it thinner. There we are with that sash now highlighted with Lothern blue. We're ready to move on to our next area, which is going to be the brown leather. So this is the boots and the gloves. Now we're going to start by base coating these areas using dryad bark. Then in the recesses, we're just going to drop a little bit of Norn oil just for some depth and shade. Then we're going to highlight up using Gawthor brown and finish off with a final highlight of Baneblade brown. But first of all, let's start with that base coat. So what I'm going to do is just get a couple of dollops, as always, some dryad bark on there, a little bit of water. And get a nice point to the brush, and then we're ready to start base coating. So you might want to do a couple of thin coats here because you've got a white undercoat, so it might just take a little bit longer just to get some of that coverage going. So just take your time, work your way on both the boots and the gloves. There we are with the leather now base coated. We're just going to coat over that leather with Norn oil. And whilst we have this paint out as well, it's worth just going over these metal ringlets as well because they've not been touched yet. So just coat that into those deeper recesses where you've got areas like around here. Like so. There we are with the Norn oil now dry. We're going to start highlighting that brown leather with Gawthor brown. So what you're looking for here is any raised areas and edges of that leather. Just want to just do a fairly broad highlight with Gawthor brown. There we are with that first highlight done. We're now going to finish off the brown leather by using Baneblade brown. So what we're going to do here is just do the similar kind of thing with the highlights we've just done, but just make it a little bit thinner. And in places, you could always thin this paint down a little bit just to make it easier. And you don't have to go all the way to the ends, just a little tip here and there. There we are with the brown leather all done. We're now going to move on to the next area, which is to paint the gold details. Now for this, we're going to start with a base coat of Retributor armour. We're then going to apply Guilliman flesh all over that, and then highlight the edges using Stormhost silver. But first of all, let's start with the Retributor armour. So like we always do, just get some on the palette, a little bit of water. Now I'm going to use a medium layer brush for this to start off with, because I've got just this little top on the staff to do, so I'm just using a slightly large brush for that. But for some of the smaller details, like around here, you might want to move to a small layer brush instead. Take your time and just work your way around all those gold details. There we are with the gold now base coated. What we're going to do now is use Guilliman flesh. We're just going to apply this into the gold. Just be mindful just to keep it to the gold. If you do make a mistake, you'll just need to tidy back up with those other colours. There we are with the Guilliman flesh now dry. What we're going to do now is highlight with Stormhost silver. So what we're looking to do is just highlight the edges. In some place I'll be using the edge of the brush. And also don't forget to highlight those little metal rings that are just on that banner pole as well. There we are, with the gold now done. What we're going to do now is move on to painting Mayari's hair. So for this, we're going to start with Xandri Dust as a base coat. We're then going to use Skeleton Horde, coat that all over. Then tidy back up some of the raised areas using Xandri Dust again. And then finish off with a highlight of Wraithbone. He's also got some parchment on his backpack, so I'll be using this colour scheme for that as well. So first of all, I'm going to get a small layer brush, just apply a little bit to the palette. Again, as always, get a nice point to it. Try not to overload that brush too much as well. So what we're going to do is just start following the hair. And just take your time. It doesn't really matter if you get any on the face because we're not actually started painting the face yet. There we are, with the hair now base coated. We're just going to coat over that using Skeleton Horde. So I'm just going to start at the bottom and work my way up. Now that the skeleton hoard's dry, we're just going to use Xandri dust again just to pick out some of those raised details, just for a bit more of a tidy up stroke highlight. There we are, with that tidy up stage now done, we're just going to finish off the hair with some highlights of wraith bone. So I'm just going to try and keep this to the tips and some of the raised areas up here as well, so I'm not going to go too mad. There we are with the hair now done. What we're going to do now is move on to the skin. So for this, to start off with, we're going to use Guilliman flesh and thin this down with contrast medium. So 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Guilliman flesh. Once that's dry, we're then going to use Corax white just to layer some of the raised areas like cheeks, nose, brows, etc. Then we're going to do another coat of thin down Guilliman flesh just over the top of that, just to add a bit more depth, just to taint that white just a little bit. And then finish off with a highlight of pallid witch flesh. So first of all, let's start with that mix. So I'm going to get 2 dollops of contrast medium, like so. I'll just give my brush a quick wash, get it dry, and then just 1 paintbrush of Guilliman flesh. So often when I'm doing like things like this, I tend to use the paintbrush as the measuring tool, just makes it a lot easier. So once I've loaded the brush, got a decent point to it, and I'm ready to start applying that. So all we've got here really is his face to concentrate on. So all I'm going to do is just gently start coating that over. Just be mindful not to get on other areas. There we are with that contrast mix now dry. What we're going to do now is just layer some of those raised areas using Corax white. So I'm just going around cheeks, top of the mouth, nose, etc. There we are with that layer of Corax white now done. What we're going to do now is do a second coat of Guilliman flesh. What this is going to do is just knock back some of that paleness, but also add a little bit more depth into the recesses. Just basically building up the layers. And again, it's the same mix, so it's 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Guilliman flesh. There we are with that second coat of Guilliman flesh now dry. What we're going to do now is just use pallid witch flesh just to pick out some extremities. So like things like the nose, a little bit on the brow, a bit on the lips, maybe just a little bit on the cheeks as well, not too much. There we are with the face now done. What we're going to do now is do some finishing touches to the actual character himself before we move on to the base. And for this, we're going to be using a Abaddon black. So we're going to pick out the eyes on both the owl and Mayari himself. And then also use that black just to line around some of the edges where you've got things like skin going to metal or skin going to hair. Just a real fine little line here and there. But first of all, let's start getting that Abaddon black and then thinning it down for the eyes. So just a little bit of water, not too much. Key thing here is just getting a nice point to your brush. Make sure it stays wet long enough so you can actually do those eyes. Now, once I've got a nice point, what I'm going to do now is just do Mayari's eye. So just a nice little slit there. Like so, for some nice definition. I've just got the eyes on the owl to do too. There we are, those black details now done. What we're going to do now is finish the model off by painting the base. So we're going to start off first by picking out the stones with Mechanica Standard Grey. Then we're going to use Gawthor Brown and thin this down and run into the recess of the stones, but also use it for the dirt that's surrounding the base as well. So first of all, let's start with that Mechanica Standard Grey. Just going to get a little bit applied like so. A little bit of water, a bit more, just so you've got a bit more running going on. So once I've loaded that up, I'm then ready to start base coating those stones. You might have to keep going down and getting some more grey, but just take your time. You might want to do a couple of coats as well because that white will start to show through. There we are with those rocks now base coated with Mechanica Standard Grey. We're going to use slightly thinned down Gawthor Brown. So this is 1 part Gawthor Brown to 1 part water. I'm just going to run that across all the soil at the bottom. Probably do a couple of coats of that. And then actually in all the cracks, I'm just going to run this Gawthor Brown in there just to give it a bit of a weathering and a dirty feel. Just take your time, work your way around. So where you've got little cracks here, just run that in. In some places you can just wipe with your finger. There we are with the Gawthor Brown now dry. You'll also notice I've just picked out the trunk on the tree with the roots as well. So what we're going to do now is move on to the next few details on the base. We're going to start by dry brushing that stonework with Dawnstone. After that, we're going to use some Guilliman flesh. Again, run that into the recesses of the actual stonework and then onto the Gawthor Brown bits of soil that surround the base. Then we're going to pick out the wheat by using Xandri dust and then coat that over with a little bit of skeleton hoard. But first of all, let's start with a dry brush. So I'm just going to get a little bit onto my brush like so. When I'm doing dry brushing, I tend to do circular motions, crisscross motions, just to try and remove as much of that actual pigment from the actual bristles. We still want some pigment on there, but we don't want too much that's embedded in the middle. So a couple of little bits like that. I'm just going to do a test. As you can see, it's still some pigment there. So all I'm going to do now is move to the base and then just start gently going back and forth, picking out those raised areas. You don't have to go too mad. Don't put too much pressure on. You're just gently tickling the actual stonework itself. You're not going to go too mad. There we are with the dry brush now done. What we're going to do now is get some gunman flesh and just start applying that over the actual soil around and just into some of the deeper recesses of the actual stonework, just for a bit of depth and shade. With the gunman flesh dry on that soil area, what we're going to do now is pick out the wheat using Xandri dust. So again, just do a couple of thin coats of this. Just be mindful not to get too much to the base, because obviously you don't want to just go over all that gunman flesh and Gawthor brown you've done. There we are with the wheat base coated. What we're going to do now is just coat that in skeleton horde. Just add some depth to those recesses. There we are with the wheat now done. We're going to finish off the base with a few final details. So first of all, we're going to use wild flesh and we're going to paint the foliage on the little tree with that. Then we're going to use Norn oil, which will coat onto the foliage, but also to the bark of the tree. And then we'll finish off with a nice soft dry brush all over of Wraithbone, just to tie all those tones together. So first of all, let's start with the wild flesh. So I'm just going to get a little bit of that, as we always do with our base coats. Just a little bit of water, not too much. Get a decent point, and then we're ready to start coating onto that actual tree. So just take your time. And don't forget to do the underneath as well. There we are with that foliage dry. What we're going to do now is just coat over that and the bark using Norn oil. There we are with that shade now dry and the bark and the foliage. We're just going to finish off by gently dry brushing all over with a little bit of Wraithbone. So just over things like the foliage, the bark, the stonework, the base. It'll just help tie everything together with that nice same tone. Once that's done, what we need to do is just paint the rim of the base that matches the rest of your collections. For this, I'm going to use a Baden Black. And there we are, the rim of the base painted. My Ori light caller is done. With the models now painted and based, my Ori light caller and his purifiers are ready to calm the wrath of the die chasm. And remember, by following this guide, you can easily paint the other members of his warband. Now, there's a couple of things to remember when painting this model. Firstly, when doing any highlighting, take your time and try and maintain a nice point to your brush. And if you need to, just support your hands with your elbows on the table for some more accuracy. Also, when using shades and contrast, try not to overload your brush, as it can quickly run out of control. If you do find that happening, just use your brush to soak up any excess. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy painting your own My Ori's purifiers, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.